I think about how racism has impacted me in my life, and I think a lot of times we look at it as circumstantial, as it happens. There's these incidents. For me, I think I've really learned, and as I reflect on my experiences, that it's always just been this common thread. It's just been present. So you start to notice things as you get older. I started to notice how people looked at me different. You know, I have a twin brother, I have an older sister, and I'm from a multiracial background. But I'm the only visibly black child. So me and my twin brother's experience growing up, that we were always together, always in school together, was vastly different, especially in like an elementary school I went to that was where I was probably the only visibly black kid in the whole school. I always did well in school, always liked school, but I was always disciplined harder. For things that I thought weren't necessary, I was always perceived as being disruptive and talked a lot when I was asking questions and trying to understand, right? And I think that's a very common experience. I remember notably one time, I don't even remember what it was for, I got caught for doing something, I don't know, something stupid as a kid. And I was with some of my friends, but we got different punishments. I had to clean a bathroom by hand, and they got let off with a warning. And that's when it really starts to click, and it really starts to resonate that to a certain level, whether my teachers recognized it or not, they had this deep ingrained idea that I had a role to play and a place to be at. And that, I think, it's an example of how you learn. Racism just exists. It's pervasive. It's part of how we operate. A lot of the racial slurs that I dealt with and the honest confrontational racism from students, from adults, you start to, at first, accept that this is just part of how you go about doing things. If you want to make a difference, this is what you have to deal with. But it gets really tiring. And especially when I got into college, I came to accept the reality that I know what I'm fully capable of. I know what I can do. But this isn't par for the course. This isn't the consequence of trying to do something good. This isn't the consequence of trying to be somebody. And so I started reading a lot. I'm in the MSI program here at Fullerton, and I love it. And I remember from the very beginning, before I even started classes here, we had a meeting and they handed us a book. It was Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, and they said, you have to read it. And I remember reading it, thinking I have like a month to read it before I retreat, and I read it in a week in between classes. And I remember when I finished it, I went straight to the senior program coordinator, George's office, and I said, what is this? He's like, what do you mean? I said, I didn't know we could write like this. I didn't know someone could use the same words I was using, but tell my story while never knowing me. To write in a way that was liberating, that was freeing, that was honest, brutally honest, and wasn't trying to hide. I was taught to hide. And so he said, well, if you like this, try this book and try this. And so now I've just been reading nonstop, constantly reading, trying to understand, for me, what felt like trying to understand who I was, but also really trying to put together the language for what I'm trying to be. And naturally, that becomes more and more anti-racist because it forces you to confront the narrative that you grew to accept. The scary thing, I think, about the talk isn't just that it's an acceptance of the world around you. It feels somewhat defeated, even though it's an honest portrayal of love. The scary thing is it's encouraging you to throw away all that you are, all of your identity. Saying hide. Hide because who you are isn't good enough. Who you are is dispensable. And so I remember all the things they told me. Remember the conversation of what to do if I get pulled over. But I also remember the talk that no one had with me, that I had to learn. I remember being late to school one day. I was late to a band practice and no one could drive me in high school, and I ran. I live about a mile away from my school, but I ran. I'm running, and I can tell I'm being followed by police officers as I'm running. I remember my neighbor calling the police on us constantly, partly because we're the only black family in the neighborhood. So you learn those things. That's the talk no one had to have. That's the words no one had to say, but you learn it. And you learn, I think above all else, to reject that which you are, in favor of performing that what they want you to be. There's a certain threshold. When things got really bad, I didn't feel anything anymore. Because that's the only way I could survive. That's the only way I could adapt. So now trying to deconstruct it and being thrown into this environment and reminded of nothing else, just how dispensable I am, was one of the hardest emotional undertakings I had. It was a reminder of why this is so important. And I think it was a test to see, what do we do, right? Because obviously Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd are not the first, and they haven't been the last. And every time I remember sitting in my room thinking, this comes around, we make a lot of noise. Sometimes minimal change is made and we give up. And I think how close they were together, combined with the fact that we were quarantined and you were stuck at home, you were forced to confront it. It was all over social media, you were forced to confront it. I think also forces us to confront the idea of, are we ready? When we say we want justice by them, are we ready for the undertaking we're trying to get? That means putting it on the table. That means looking at racism as more than just circumstantial. That means also evaluating the teachers and how they treat you in school. The comments, the people, evaluating that piece of it. If you're not ready to recognize just how deep this hole goes, how broken our foundation is, we won't make any progress. But that was the realization I can come to. But this past summer was a reminder of not just how dispensable my life can be, but how critical it is that I make something of it. I'm obsessed with James Baldwin. Baldwin had a mission. He had a mission to bear witness to the world around him. And he did it in a way that was so beautiful and so elegant that the language that he created is the language we use today. To say, maybe if we looked at communities of color as more than just the constellation, more than just bodies at polls, that maybe we can move somewhere and actually substantively change the course of our country. But also to share a narrative that I think for the first time, at least for myself, is not deficit-based, is affirmative. I'm young enough that 9/11 happened at the same time, around the same time I was being born. And to see the massive amount of hate crimes that followed, and the hateful rhetoric that followed, knowing that this isn't new in America, but what that meant was, I think we see a lot of young people becoming politicized at a younger age. The unfortunate reality of us being forced to stay at home because of COVID-19 meant that you couldn't escape what happened this summer. You had to watch it. You had to watch it over and over again. And it meant when injustice ruled that you couldn't escape that either. You had to watch it. And as young people, I think, becoming politicized earlier and earlier about issues of race and trying to find some sense of the answer. I was encouraged to see how many book lists were shared this summer. I was encouraged to see how many resources were shared, organizations started, like my organization, working together, desperate to find an answer. The reality is that the situations haven't changed much. So I think that the test is also, how resilient can we be? Are we ready to do something about it? Put everything on the table. To honestly recognize that racism undergirds all that we do. That it's a part of the fabric of the creation of our country, so much so that we forget, right? Congress, the White House, operate in D.C. Beneath D.C. are ancestral slaves that built that place. Are we ready to recognize the fabric of what we sit on? Because if we're not, this is a moment. As much as we use the words, it's a movement, it's a moment. We move past it. And I'm not saying that because this is my perspective. I'm saying that this is Baldwin's words. End of fire next time. If we do not insist like lovers, earnestly combat and take back the nation we want, to end this racial nightmare. If we can't do that, right, then he warns us that we have the future of the slave song. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, fire next time. We are in the moment, and I need us to move.